Fletcher gave a great number of worked examples himself to show how situation ethics might work in practice. It is as well to be aware of them so you can use one or more of them in an essay as examples. There are 4 of his examples covered here, but there are others that he dealt with, including the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki and euthanasia. This scenario is an extreme one. The law at the time of writing for Fletcher would have prevented abortion completely. Ordinarily, it may be that one would argue abortion should be avoided. In fact, Fletcher felt that abortion generally was more loving than bringing a baby into the world that was unwanted. In this case, however, even if usually you would consider it loving to avoid abortion, the severity of the case suggests it should be accepted. Justice, one of the 6 fundamental propositions, for the mother means that she should not have to go forward with the pregnancy and the birth. Justice for the baby would surely say so too. If you consider the outcome for her being made to see it through, she's likely to be on antipsychotic medication, which would be harmful to the child if she continues with it. However, coming off the medication for the duration of the pregnancy would make her still more mentally ill. If she understands what has happened to her, then she will experience emotional trauma. If she doesn't understand, then the hormonal and physical changes in her body are likely to unbalance her further. Here we are assessing the consequences or ends as the 6 fundamental propositions require. The child will be born into an institution and either immediately removed, which would be damaging for either or both of them, or if kept by the mother, would have to be raised in an entirely inappropriate setting. Ultimately, there is no good outcome here. There are only horrible options, no matter which way you choose. However, situation ethics allows a person to choose the least bad option if it achieves more love or lessens suffering. Personalism, one of the 4 working principles, means that we must reject legalism and look at the individual most affected. The girl in this instance is the one who stands to suffer more by continuing with the pregnancy than anyone else, and so we must show the most love to her. In this circumstance, it seems too awful to imagine. There can surely never be an excuse for a mother killing her own child. Ordinarily, Fletcher would be compelled to agree, because it cannot produce another loving outcome. However, if we apply the fundamental proposition of love is not the same as like, then we can see that love has no favourites, and in this extreme situation, the mother has to weigh up how much love is achieved by protecting the baby or by killing it to prevent the crying. In the end, more love is achieved in the killing because more people survive long enough to make it to safety. This is the agapeic calculus. Fletcher says, the hedonic calculus becomes the agapeic calculus, the greatest amount of neighbour welfare for the largest number of neighbours possible. Page 95, Situation Ethics. The mother that loves her neighbour as herself, one of the 6 fundamental propositions, puts the needs of the many above the needs of the few, herself and her child, and works to protect as many people as she can. In this case, Mrs. Bergermeyer did the right thing ethically because the outcome produced the maximum amount of love possible. Pragmatically, this was the most practical action that she could have performed to achieve a loving outcome. Remember, Fletcher still felt that we enter a moral dilemma with the rules of our society, and normally adultery would be condemned. The reason for this is that such an action would not be loving to the people directly or indirectly involved. However, in this case, while Mrs. Bergermeyer does something sinful by breaking her marriage vows, Fletcher would see it as bravely sinful, and in fact would see it as the right and most loving action. The quicker she can return to her children and her husband, the more love that can be achieved. The fact that the family welcomed her and the baby home with joy shows how much they were prepared to demonstrate the principles that Fletcher has outlined. He says, if people do not believe it is wrong to have sexual relations outside marriage, it isn't, unless they hurt themselves, their partners, or others. In this instance, the first mate was convicted of murder for pitching the males out. In fact, they were not to know that they were soon to be picked up. One of the other lifeboats waited 6 days for rescue, and the whole company were terrified that they would drown. The first mate took a pragmatic action to save and preserve as many lives as possible. The risk was that keeping all the passengers on board would result in everyone drowning. Relativism says that given the situation, throwing some overboard may sometimes be the best thing to do if it serves love to do so. Love was shown to the majority here to try and get them to safety. Fletcher understood the man's decision as loving. Since only the end justifies the means, we can see that the first mate managed to get the remaining passengers in the boat to safety, thus achieving a loving outcome.